extraordinarily difficult summer for so many Canadians from coast to coast to coast, as communities have been hit with wildfires, with extreme weather events, on top of all the other economic challenges people are facing. And the one thing that we've been able to see everywhere across the country is communities stepping up to be there for each other, neighbors helping neighbors, people welcoming their fellow Canadians coming in from far-off communities, fleeing for their lives, having lost everything. It is an extraordinary credit to all Canadians how people have pulled together in the most difficult and terrifying times. I'm here in Kelowna today to be able to thank so many of the firefighters who've been on the front lines here over the past while, but even as I'm in Kelowna, I know places across BC are continuing to fight and struggle with forest fires. We are going to continue to be there as a federal government in supporting whether it's with the Canadian Armed Forces, whether it's with federal supports to the provincial resources. This is all about everyone coming together to be there for each other. That's what we're seeing from individuals. That's what we're seeing from orders of government. That's what we're going to continue to focus on even as we move forward and rebuild and learn from the experiences here and prepare for challenges into the future as well. C'est un grand privilège pour moi d'être ici à Kelowna pour remercier les premiers répondants, les pompiers qui ont été là pour aider, pour protéger des maisons, des communautés ici. Je sais qu'à travers la Colombie-Britannique, à travers le pays, il y a encore des feux de forêt qui font ravage et nous allons être là en tant que gouvernement fédéral pour aider, que ce soit avec les forces armées, que ce soit avec des ressources pour les provinces. Ça a été un été assez épouvantable en termes d'impact sur les communautés, impact sur les individus, mais à chaque étape, partout où on voit les Canadiens en train d'être là les uns pour les autres. Oui, nos premiers répondants, nos héros, mais aussi des voisins, des citoyens qui sont là pour s'entraider. Ça fait chaud au cœur, mais nous savons aussi que nous allons devoir apprendre de tout ce qu'on a vu cet été pour se préparer et pour se protéger pour les années à venir. Happy to take questions now.
Prime Minister, it's Brady Strachan with CBC Kelowna here. Premier David Eby spoke about evacuees waiting a long time for emergency services, waiting in cars, sleeping overnight in cars, many hours. He says there needs to be year-round emergency services. Is this something the federal government would support?
Well, right now we're still very much focused on getting through the emergency phase we're in right now, but there's no question. There are lots of extraordinary stories of heroism, of effectiveness, of things that we've learned from years past, well put into place now. But there's a lot more to learn and there's a lot more to do. We know, unfortunately, extreme weather events are going to get more frequent, more extreme in the years to come, and we have to learn very much from what worked, also what didn't work as well as it could have, and put that in place. So I look forward to lots more conversations with Premier Eby and with ministers and with municipalities to make sure that we're preparing for years to come.
And then the Premier of the Northwest Territories has spoken out about infrastructure gaps there and say that the federal government has failed because of those infrastructure gaps. Wondering if I could get your reaction to this.
When I spoke with Premier Cochrane last week in advance of the evacuation, it was clear that having one road that itself was vulnerable out of Yellowknife, it was a huge challenge. We're talking about the concerns about evacuating close to 25,000 people from the territorial capital. And within 2 days, they'd evacuated close to 20,000 people in a very effective way. And that's, as you say, not a credit to great infrastructure, because the infrastructure wasn't. It's a credit to community members and individuals and people and frontline support workers helping out, making sure that it all happened effectively. But that's part of the reflections we have to have going forward on how we can make sure that we have even more resilient communities. So whereas this time the fires in Yellowknife were able to be prevented from getting too close to the city, next time we might not be so lucky, and we're going to need to learn from these near misses. Thank you.
Good morning, Tammy Williams with Shaw Spotlight. So I also have a question about money for rebuild, but from the perspective of someone whose neighborhood was evacuated. I think many of us are indeed wondering where the money will come to rebuild the communities, and perhaps that's especially poignant for people who may not have had insurance.
We are facing a changing world right now, changing climate. We're seeing more and more intense weather events. Insurance is going to get more difficult for people to obtain, even for those who can obtain it. And we know that that falls on all of us to be there for help, to help communities and individuals who've lost everything, who are having to rebuild. We need to take lessons in how to rebuild safely. I mean, we've seen the difference between neighborhoods that were built with fire safety in mind and neighborhoods that were built before that was really something we're thinking about. I've had a number of conversations about the need for better forest management. There are a lot of things that we need to do to be thoughtful and careful as we rebuild. I think people understand that we're in different situations now, and we're going to have to be really thoughtful and careful about how we work together. But the one thing I can say is we are going to be there for each other. That's what Canadians do. All orders of government will be there to work together to make sure that Canadians are getting through this. That's what our job is as governments, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Thank you.
May I have this answer in French as well? So
Oui, bien sûr. Je pense que nous reconnaissons à quel point les gens ont vécu des moments extrêmement difficiles, mais on sait aussi qu'on va avoir plus de moments difficiles dans les années à venir. Il va falloir qu'on apprenne de ce qu'on a fait ici, mais aussi qu'on comprenne que pour plusieurs, ça va être de plus en plus difficile d'avoir des assurances et ça va exiger qu'on reconstruise de façon attentionnée et délibérée pour protéger les communautés d'événements météorologiques extrêmes, qu'on gère différemment les forêts. Il y a du travail à faire, il y a des investissements à faire, mais on sait que les Canadiens, nous sommes là les uns pour les autres et on va continuer de l'être. Les ordres de gouvernement vont continuer de travailler ensemble et on va répondre aux besoins.
Prime Minister Neetu Garcha with Global National News. Just looking for some specifics. As you know, the population of the Northwest Territories is seeing 70% of it under evacuation. Those people are out of their homes. The Territory is offering $750 per person to help them get by, but the Territory is being stretched financially, offering that right now, and this is several weeks in. What specific support can the federal government offer the Territory to be able to continue?
As I said to Premier Cochrane, and as we've continued to demonstrate in our constant engagement with our territorial counterparts, the federal government will be there. There's the DFAA, the Disaster Response Assistance Arrangement, that is there to support. We're going to be there, understanding as well that the Territory, almost by definition, doesn't have the kinds of resources that a province like BC does. And that's where the federal government has been leaning in from the very beginning. And I gave assurances to Premier Cochrane that we would continue to be there to support as people are facing the challenges of returning and rebuilding in some cases. As we've learned through many, many emergencies, it's easy to, or not easy, but it's quicker to shut something down or leave a place than it is to return or start up something again. And that's where governments have a really important responsibility to play, and we will be there as a government.
And Prime Minister, some of the local leaders who you've met with this morning have called for something very specific from the federal government. They say that they rely on winning grants in order to get infrastructure funding for things like water, sewers, roads, for example, in Lake Country. Some of them are single-lane alternating, and building more fire-resilient homes. They can't rely on winning grants to be able to ensure that they're ready for the climate change events that are inevitable. Will your government commit to providing stable, consistent funding to these small communities?
When we got elected in 2015, we made a commitment to invest in infrastructure in ways that previous federal governments simply had not. And we stepped up massively on wastewater, on investing in municipalities, and building the kinds of infrastructures that are necessary. We're seeing that as being even more important right now. An example that I gave to the mayors when we spoke this morning was what we've done with public transit. We know that municipalities plan transit over a 10-year timeline and yet aren't sure whether they're going to get money over 10 years, for example. We just brought in a $3 billion dedicated yearly permanent public transit funding to allow cities and municipalities to plan for that. I think we need to start looking at that around emergencies. We certainly need to look at that around infrastructure investments so that cities can make the plans to continue to grow in ways that we all need, not just our economy to grow, but our communities to grow. This is something with which we are fully seized, and our Minister of Infrastructure, among others, will be fully engaged with. And I look forward to continuing to work closely with provincial and municipal leaders in a collaborative way to respond to these challenges.
Hi, Prime Minister. Vanessa Lee with CTV News. We've heard from people in the Shuswap region who say that they feel abandoned. Some people, as you may have heard, they felt compelled to stay behind because they say that help did not come soon enough, and they feel that help isn't coming. Why aren't you going there today?
Obviously, we have seen terrible fires right across the country, and I've tried to get to as many places as possible. And it's also extremely important that we not interfere with ongoing exercises, ongoing work. I'm here today, but I know Minister Sajjan, our Minister of Emergency Preparedness, who stayed home in BC while we were having our cabinet retreat earlier this week, so that he could lead on the emergency response, is closely engaged. Look, people are scared. And there's lots of reasons to be scared as we see fires approach, as we see homes under threat, as we communities impacted. What we're seeing across the country is first responders stepping up in incredible ways. And I really would emphasize that anything residents and communities can do to facilitate the work that firefighters are doing as they're trying to get in and protect communities, protect homes, is really, really important. We need to make sure we're allowing our first responders to do the jobs they have of keeping the rest of us safe.
There are at least a couple of hundred people who have lost their homes and their businesses. Can you talk about the federal funding that's in place to help people get through the next few days and the weeks ahead, and also the supports that will be coming for the fire departments as well, who are facing more aggressive and fast-moving fires?
Obviously, the province has the lead on that. That's the way our system works. But let me say unequivocally, the federal government will be there as a partner. We will be there to support. We will be there to rebuild. We will be there to make sure we're not just learning the lessons that we're taking through these very difficult moments, but we're applying the lessons and that we're actually increasing our resources and our ability to keep people safe going forward. This is a time for all Canadians to continue to pull together as they have been, and all orders of government are no different. We will continue rolling up our sleeves and being there to support each other.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, Benoît Ferradiani de Radio-Canada. Première question, quel soutien allez-vous apporter aux évacués, à la province, au service des incendies ici?
Comme j'ai dit au Premier ministre Ibi, nous allons être là avec les ressources nécessaires. On a plusieurs programmes pour appuyer les provinces quand ils ont des incendies ou des événements d'urgence comme cela. Mais en fin de compte, ce que je peux toujours dire, c'est que nous allons être là en tant que gouvernement fédéral, en tant que partenaire aux provinces, aux municipalités, pour s'assurer que les gens puissent passer à travers de ces moments difficiles.
Le gouvernement compte créer un service fédéral de lutte des incendies, à l'exemple de ce qui se fait aux États-Unis avec FEMA. En français, in English, please.
Je pense qu'il y a beaucoup de leçons qu'on doit tirer de ce qu'on est en train de faire et de ce qu'on est en train de très bien faire. D'avoir vu, par exemple, le niveau de coordination entre la communauté de Kelowna, de Lake Country, de West Kelowna, de West Bank First Nations ensemble. Ils ont pu travailler ensemble pour mettre leurs ressources là où ils étaient nécessaires pour répondre. Oui, on est ouvert à changer les modalités, la façon qu'on travaille ensemble, mais il faut qu'on s'assure de bien le faire et on va avoir ces discussions pour répondre à cette question, comment mieux être là pour protéger les citoyens dans les années à venir. I think there's a lot of reflections on how we shift and how we empower people to better respond in the future, to make sure that our firefighters are able to do their jobs in the best possible way. I think there's a lot to learn from the seamless and extraordinary cooperation and collaboration that happened here across West Kelowna, Kelowna and Lake Country and the regional municipalities, to make sure that everything was being done and that resources were sent to the right places. There's a lot of local knowledge that we need to make sure is at the center of everything we do. But yes, we're there for having discussions about the best ways to make sure that we're protecting citizens and communities into what will be a future with more and more extreme weather events for all of us.
Off topic, apologies. Just wondering what measures the government is working on to help newcomers and international students find affordable housing.
Over the past number of days, as the federal cabinet gathered, we have been extremely focused on the challenges of housing. There's no question that we all have to make sure we're stepping up even more on responding to the growth in Canada's population and the growth in our economy. We need to continue to make sure people are seeing houses go up in their communities, not just rebuilding ones that are lost here, but making sure we're growing even faster. That's where the federal government is going to be working closely with provinces and municipalities, as we have been, to make sure we're responding to this housing crisis. The one thing around housing is that we've faced crises before. We've faced massive challenges in building homes when it was needed in a very rapid way, whether it was the GIs returning from World War II, or whether it was when the baby boom grew up and bought their own homes in the 60s and 70s. There is an ability that we all have to respond to this challenge. It is a solvable challenge, but it's going to require everyone stepping up together, and that's very much what we're focused on. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.